My name is Reverend Kylie Renner, and on behalf of the entire One Spiritual Center community, I want to welcome you here today. Thank you for being brave this morning on one of those days where we started off with very different weather this morning than we have now, and I'm certain it will continue to change today. The winds of change are blowing right now, and so thank you for bringing your presence here. So not great weather for balloons this weekend, and we have a lot of disappointed people out there in our city. So I've been actually thinking about all of that and about like how do we come to accept the things that are. And weather is such an amazing example of that because there's really not much we can do. Even if we wish we could. And so there's something about being present to exactly what is as it is, and the peace and the wisdom that can come from that. And so I have more thoughts about that for later, but I'm just in that space this morning of just accepting things as they are. And as we allow ourselves to be present here today, we're just going to take a moment to anchor into this day. So if you're comfortable closing your eyes, we're going to open with a prayer. Just breathing into what it feels like to be here, right here. With all of the energy swirling around us and in us and as us. With the with the wind moving around us and reminding us of change and presence. And I just recognize the power and the presence of the One guiding us here today together, whether we're here in person or watching online. I just recognize that right where we are is absolutely the power and the presence of the One. And I just allow the wisdom of acceptance and this present moment to guide us today into whatever it is we need to hear and feel and know. And I let go into this day. And I let it be. And so it is. So I switched poems I was going to read this morning in honor of this wind. And so this is a poem by Mary Oliver entitled West Wind Number 2. And it's a love poem. You are young, so you know everything. You leap into the boat and begin rowing, but listen to me. Without fanfare, without embarrassment, without any doubt, I talk directly to your soul. Listen to me. Lift the oars from the water. Let your arms rest and your heart and heart's little intelligence, and listen to me. There is life without love. It's not worth a burnt penny or a scuffed shoe. It's not worth the body of a dead dog 9 days unburied. When you hear a mile away and still out of sight the churn of water as it begins to swirl and roil, fretting around the sharp rocks, when you hear that unmistakable pounding, when you feel the mist on your mouth and sense ahead the embattlement, the long falls plunging and steaming, then row. Row for your life toward it. And so we just take that energy of rowing toward that most essential thing, that love. And we're going to allow the meditation to move us today.
was a song by John Bartlett called As If.
Thank you guys. And I love the funhouse mirror base. It looks like it's been shrunk in some strange direction. But it sounds amazing. So it's been quite intense and interesting around here recently. A lot of things moving in a lot of directions and getting organized to start a bunch of big projects in the midst of all of it. And I was reminded this week of the fact that 4 years ago this week, we were finishing having spent almost 3 weeks on our roof, removing the shingles that had been here on this roof. So we had this giant trash thing in the driveway, and it was hot and it was miserable up there. And when I was thinking back to the whole process and about the fact that I'm not sure I want to do that particular part of the project ever again, I was reminded of all of the things that had to happen first before we could do that. So when we bought this house, the roof was in really, really bad shape. It was in such bad shape that when it rained, there were puddles on the floor inside. And they had not adequately vented a certain area of the roof. And so it wasn't just, the roof that was the issue, but all of the wood underneath it was rotten and it was caving in. So you could not, in fact, step on it or you would fall through. And so it was something that had to happen, right? Like this was an essential thing. But it wasn't that simple. First of all, it wasn't that simple because before we bought the house, when a roof needed to get repaired or fixed, all they did was put more roof on top of it. And so they just kept on adding these layers, which when you actually go back to fix that right means that there are really, really huge amount of weight and heft and debris that has to get removed. And it's so interesting to look at this process of something that seems like it would be simple. You take the old one off and you put the new one on. But this idea of like all of the things that we do to make it more difficult, oftentimes because we don't want to do the real work. And what happens when we are willing to do the real work? Like what is actually simple then? And so also before we were able to put the new roof on, we knew that we needed to upgrade the heating and cooling because that was not adequate as well. And in order to do that, we had to replace our entire electrical service so that we could do that, so that we could remove the former cooling unit off the roof. And then, of course, we wanted some new porch here because the other one was so small and dark, and we didn't know, in fact, that we were creating a stage at the time, but here we go. And we had to do all of that before we could even start thinking about removing what was there. And when we start to look at this from a spiritual level, right, like all of the things that we have to do and put in place so that the growth can really happen, so that we can boil things down to the essentials. And I've been thinking a lot about how, as human beings, we have this incredible tendency to try and make things more complicated than they should be. Oftentimes because we just don't want to do the work to do it right? Like internally. And so when I'm finding myself in these situations, in these places in my life where it feels really complicated, I have to step back and be willing to question whether it really needs to be that complicated, or am I trying to sidestep the work that really needs to happen and therefore making it complicated. So I know it's really popular to say, I'm in a relationship and it's complicated. And whenever I hear someone say that, I have to say, I'm sorry, no. You're in a relationship with complication. You're not in a relationship. And there's something real and true about realizing that when we are in alignment with who we really are, when we're willing to let things be as they really are, when we're not sidestepping things, that this whole thing we're doing really isn't complicated. It doesn't need to be complicated. We don't need to make it complicated. We don't have to make ourselves feel needed or smart or capable because we're able to handle the drama and the complication. Like, it really isn't. Like, if it's right, it's right. If it's wrong, it's wrong. We can feel it. It doesn't have to be complicated. So Pema Chodron says that we think that we have to, that the point is to pass the test or overcome the problem, but the truth is that things don't really get solved. They come together and they fall apart. They come together again and they fall apart again. It's just like that. And the healing comes from letting there be room for all of this to happen. Room for grief, for relief, for misery, for joy. It really is that simple. And when we stop aiming for this kind of problem solving where we're going to get to some point where we don't have to have things be falling apart and coming back together, like there's this really big space for freedom. Because not only do we allow ourselves and everyone around us to be exactly where they are, but we also allow ourselves to remember that we're doing something bigger here and that there's room for all of it. And so there's something really interesting about this time of year. I know this happens in other places as well, but there's a lot of jokes about how in New Mexico this time of year it can be summer in the morning and then winter by evening, and you never know. And there's something really wise about the ability to stay present to all of that without making it be bad, right? Without making it be wrong, without making it be something that we wish wasn't. There's something about weather in general that can teach us that. And so when we think about that from a spiritual perspective, there's a way in which we are being asked to just really accept the weather. And the Scandinavians love to say there is no bad weather, just bad clothing. And I add, and bad preparation, right? And there's this way in which when we start to just really accept what is, right? Accepting the weather, accepting the coming together and falling apart, accepting that it really is that simple, that it's not something we have to fight, that it's not something we have to overcome, that there aren't these just problems that are seeking for us to solve them on this level where we solve it and then it's done. That there's this way in which we start to really open to the fact that there's all kinds of things always happening in us, and they're always pointing us in the same direction, which is always more love. And so when I've been thinking about like this kind of simplifying that's needed in my life right now in order for me to be able to focus on what I really need to be focused on, there's this way in which I know I'm being called to not fight what is, and really get open to accepting the weather, accepting the seasons, accepting what's going on inside of me, accepting what I'm being called into and through. So I actually did not write down who the author of this poem is, so someone else will have to. Oh, you know what? I did. It's Walt Whitman. There, great. It's from Song of Myself. And he speaks so beautifully to this, like that space where we stop rowing, right? So he says, I do not trouble my spirit to vindicate itself or be understood. I see that the elementary laws never apologize. I exist as I am, and that is enough. If no other in the world be aware, I sit content. And if each and all be aware, I sit content. And I won't be able to read you that again. So we're going to accept that. But the energy of that, right? The energy of saying, I understand that which is essential never needs to apologize for itself. And it doesn't need to be understood or vindicated or explained. It just is. And there's something inside of us that is so essentially connected to that is requiring our attention right now in a new way. Because it's no longer okay to make things complicated so we don't have to deal with what we really need to deal with. So we don't have to be aware of what we really need to be aware of. And so when we think about this from the level of the energy of change and transformation and how we can be in that while still engaged in the idea that it can really be simple. There's this way in which I recognize it's kind of like opening to talking about the weather in a new way. So if you'll notice that human beings have a tendency to like to talk to each other, especially people they don't know really well about the weather, right? It's coffee shop talk or grocery store in the line talk. And there's something really interesting about the fact that we are comfortable about talking about this thing that we can't control. This thing that we know we're not supposed to control. This thing that we know is not something for us to try and deny. And what if we started to talk about more things in our lives in that way, or hold them in that energy? Like, it's the weather. This thing happened in my life. This challenge arose. It's the weather. It's nothing more than that. It will change. It will shift. It will move. It will do all of the things that it's going to do. And I do not need to make it a problem. I might need to put different clothing on. I might need to put some sunscreen on. I might need to do some things, but I do not have to make it complicated. I can remember that which is essential in all of this takes us back past that place where we have decided to make things bigger than they need to be. So there's this great book by a teacher who decided that the way she was going to transform her practice was to start to teach outdoors. And so she started a school in the Pacific Northwest where the students, instead of working in a classroom setting, have all of their academic stuff happen outside. And she was reminded when she first started doing this, everyone said, but you can't teach in the rain. You can't teach in the rain. You can't have class in the rain, and this is the Pacific Northwest, so what are you going to do? And she wrote something really beautiful about this, and I think it's really important on a spiritual level. What she says is you can teach in the rain, of course, but you teach differently. You learn differently. The wilderness is not merely a backdrop for this class. Everything we do is placed in the context of the wilderness. The rain is an integral element of this wilderness place. And so later she says, teaching in the wilderness is powerful, but teaching for wilderness is infinitely more so. Teaching for wilderness implies listening to the voices of the land. And our goal is less than to change the world, and rain is one of the most essential ingredients of place. Our job is to learn to listen to it. So from the level of this idea of like, how do we stay present to the weather, like all of the weather in our life on a spiritual level, I think a lot of us have made exceptions for the challenges, right? And we're like, we're teaching in the wilderness. And I love this idea that we're teaching for the wilderness, right? Like we're learning for the things that are showing up. We're transforming for those things. Not in spite of them, not just because, but like actually for them. And when we move that energy, a lot of things become clear. When it's not we're overcomplicating something and making it be bigger than it needs to be, we start to see what we are actually here for and what that energy really is, and we start to listen differently. And then a whole lot of things that we thought were essential really fall away. And I have to tell you that this is one of the greatest blessings of the spiritual path for me, is finding places where I know I've let go of something that really didn't matter. And it no longer occupying all of this space and all of this mental energy and all of these things that I did in order to make it feel or seem like that complicated thing was somehow essential. And so there's this process of like shedding, of getting closer and closer to what is essential and letting a lot of the other stuff go. So we just like shift this balance in the direction of something that's sane. Because I know that when I'm overcomplicating something because I'm avoiding doing the work, that I am not being sane. And it's so funny to watch this, right? And I do this sometimes. There's something I know I need to do. I know that it will, and I know it is essential. I know it will only take a very short amount of time, but I do not want to do it. And I don't want to do it so much that I am willing to complicate my entire life so that I can avoid having to actually do it. And so it used to be, I clean toilets more often now, but it used to be that when I found myself asking my friends if I could come clean their toilets, I knew I was really trying to avoid something, right? Really trying to not do that thing that I really, just needed to do. That I was making it way more complicated than it needed to be. And when I find myself in that space now, I realize that it's more subtle, but there's these ways in which we get trapped in these ideas about how things have to be. And really being willing to listen and to make things simple can reveal all these ways in which the universe is actually trying to support us, and we're getting in the way. So I just am going to ask us, especially as we enter into this new season, to start to really be clear about what could be simple, what could really be that simple, and not simple in a bad way. Just it could be simple because we're willing to do the work to get clear. We're willing to do to look at what we need to look at so that we can look at things differently. We're willing to do all of that so that we can get to that place of freedom. And I just recognize that there's probably some shedding that needs to happen in order for that to happen. But that can be simple too. It really can. And there's such a great invitation in that to be willing to really allow ourselves to get back to what is essential. And this time we're living in is such a great reminder of that. So I'm going to ask the band to come on up. One, because it's cold. But two, we're going to anchor into some prayer this morning as we open ourselves to welcoming this kind of place of simplicity and freedom. So as we prepare the way for that, I'm just going to ask you to think about maybe something you're overcomplicating. I hope you have something. I can hand you a few if you if you need some of mine. And we're going to see if opening to the idea that it could actually be simple can create some shifts. So please join me as we sing into our prayer.
A prayer of love
So our prayer of love today is a prayer of remembering the deep love that sent us here, that is always present, that is asking us to remember it in a new way today. And it is in this remembrance that we remember that it really can be simple. This whole thing that we're doing here, growing, transforming, moving, changing, shifting, coming together and falling apart, that all of it really can be simple. And that we have the freedom to lean into a way of being that is open enough to create space for that which is real and essential to be the focus, and everything else is just the weather. And I just recognize that freedom that we are all seeking is right there in that precious, powerful moment that we exist in right here and now. And that it really is that simple, that we came here from love, we came here to love, that it is for love that we've been called here. And I just recognize that love in every direction, allowing whatever it is that we're overcomplicating to become simple. And I just let it be. And so it is.
Our prayer of love lifts us high. It heals us, sustains us, and sets us free. Our prayer of love lifts us high. It heals us, sustains us, and sets us free. Here's a tune by Miles Davis. Little zesty, Joe. Hey, zesty. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
And no one's music is blown away. And by spring, we're going to think that this is like, oh, it's warm again. And today, everyone's like, brrr. So thank you for being here. Thank you for braving this weather change. Thank you for bringing your love into community this morning. It's so lovely to see your smiling faces. And we are going to end with a song.
Together and feel alright. One love, one heart. Let's give thanks to the Lord and we can feel alright. People, get ready for the train coming. You don't need no baggage, you just get on board. All you need is faith. Hear that diesel humming. You don't need no ticket, you just thank the Lord. One love, together and feel alright. One love, one heart. Let's give thanks to the Lord and we can feel alright. People get ready for the train to Jordan, picking up passengers from coast to coast. Faith is the key. Open the doors and board up. There's room for all that love the boat. One love, one heart. Let's get together and feel alright. One love, one heart. Let's give thanks to the Lord and we can feel alright. Let's get together and feel alright.
And we have one last blessing to sing to one another.
Go forth and walk in beauty and know that we are one. Thank